Welcome to this tutorial on creating a basic 3D game loop using Java. In this video, we'll walk through the steps needed to set up a simple game loop and understand its core components. First, what is a game loop? Simply put, it's the central component of a game that continuously executes while the game is running. It handles updating the game state, rendering graphics, and processing user input. To get started, we'll set up a new Java project. If you're using an IDE like IntelliJ or Eclipse, create a new Java project named Basic 3D Game. Now, let's set up the necessary dependencies. For a basic 3D game, we need Java's 2D graphic support, and we'll also use the lightweight Java game library, LWJGL, for better 3D rendering. Make sure to include the LWJGL library in your project. Next, let's create the basic structure of our game. We will need a class called Game, which will encapsulate our game loop. Let's create this class. Inside the start method, we need to create the game loop. The game loop can be implemented using a while loop that continuously runs until the game is exited. Let's add that. To properly handle the exit condition, we need to set up a Boolean flag called shouldExit. This will help us cleanly exit from the game loop. We'll create the update and render methods next. The update method is where we handle game logic, and the render method is for drawing the game state on the screen. Now let's implement a simple way to control the frame rate of our game loop. We want our game to run at a consistent frame rate, say 60 frames per second. To achieve this, we can calculate the time taken for each loop iteration and sleep for the remaining time if we're running too fast. Before we test our game loop, we need a way to initiate the game window. We'll use LWJGL's GLFW library to create a simple window for rendering our game. In this code, we initialize GLFW and create a window of size 800 by 600 pixels with the title 3D Game. Now let's add the invocation of our window initialization within our start method. Next, we will need to ensure that OpenGL contexts are correctly set up. This involves setting the viewport to match the window size and clearing the color buffer every frame. In this render method, we clear the screen using GLClear and then swap the front and back buffers to show the rendered image. Make sure to include the OpenGL imports at the beginning of your file. It's time to test our game loop. Run the main method to kick things off. Make sure to create a game object and call the start method. Now, if everything is set up correctly, you should see a simple window open for your game. This is the basic structure of a game loop in Java, where we update, render, and control frame rates. To handle exit events properly, let's implement a key callback to set our shouldExit flag when the window is closed or the escape key is pressed. This callback function will help handle user inputs, allowing users to quit the game gracefully. With that said, let's update the init window method to include this key callback. With our game loop functioning and the exit conditions in place, you're now equipped to build more complex logic into your game loop. In the next steps, we will explore handling user input more effectively, implementing simple 3D movement, and adding basic collision detection. With a foundation built, you can start integrating graphics, models, and game objects, which may involve learning how to load textures and use shaders. Before we wrap up, make sure to follow along and create your own modifications to the game loop. Experiment with different frame rates and see how that affects rendering. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more Java programming tutorials, and drop a comment if you have any questions or need further assistance. Happy coding!